Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's June 15th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And really, for all intents and purposes, this was a range day. Basically, from the open to the close, we were in a 5 point range. Uh, when the FOMC news came out, we did break higher, and this kind of purple burgundy, purple, I guess you'd call that more of a purple color. That was when I would be out, really going into the 1 o'clock news. I probably wouldn't trade that last hour. And I didn't like this just because we're going sideways and it's just on both sides of the M, and there's no way to make heads or tails of that. I like going short here, but once it just kind of got hung up there, I wouldn't take any more shorts there or longs. I just kind of sit tight, and that really got you into the noon hour. And you see, this is probably where the news came out right here. And really, by the time, actually, there's a trade right here that you could have entered that I forgot to, didn't get to. I'm okay with you taking that one right there. But I would have sat still, and maybe even there you may not take that one. But it's pretty obvious that we're headed lower at that point, and that's a failed second entry long. Um, Actually, it's not because we did break higher here, so that's not a failed second entry long, but we got back inside the range and it tested. Look how bearish that bar is. It's a pretty big bar, so I'd probably use a limit order and try to get a little better entry. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, it was basically a range day. The news kind of got here, and there was also the crude oil early in the morning, and that came out at 9. But you see, it didn't really affect anything. We just kind of went sideways after that. Uh, Again, I didn't like entering right in here. Um, this one actually probably could have been green, but we didn't have a new high in. But that's a really bearish bar, and it would have worked. You probably would have gotten fooled here, but that one could probably be green to the downside because it was very tempting trade, and it would have worked, but you would have had to ride out. You would have had to ride out it going sideways. Once it started going sideways here, I would have just sat tight. I don't see any entries, maybe until right here, because you got such a little small bar there. But again, we'll talk about that when we get there. So really, range day. Early on, we had a trend working up. I wasn't sure about this. I drew this kind of brown. I don't really think it was in play. I left it on there just to show it. I got it off these first few swings off the high and drug it down. It did come into play once there, but the blue one you see there works better. This one was too steep, really, and we just kind of went sideways there, and then you get a break. And we tried several times to make a new high. We didn't get one until here. We just kind of went sideways. So really, you got a channel working up here, and you had a break, and this could have been the new high, and then this was the correction. So you could have looked at it that way. But this one's so steep, it's no surprise that it flattened out some. And this was a pretty good trend here. So you could have stayed with this and had a few more trades. But I'm going to back out. We'll talk about what I saw, and we'll go from there. Somebody said yesterday that maybe I didn't back out far enough. So I'll back on out here where it's a little better, easier to see. Um, First trade I saw was this short. Notice we're working down. You got a channel, you get a break. You try to go to a new low, it pulls back and then turns down. That's a nice trap right there. And there's some strong resistance right across there. We're going to push down and make a new low here. You're really looking for a retest of the high, but you don't ever get a long setup really. So, and this one really is borderline being green, because it's right into this support here, and there is some strong support across there, but this is a trap, and it's probably going to push down real quickly. It got just enough to get a scalp, and then it bounces. So, again, it's real close to being green. You could make the argument for it being green because it's into all that support across there, and you are looking for a retest of the high. So, the more I look at it, the more I'm going to change it. But I liked it because it was a trap, and generally those traps um, are pretty good trades. So I wouldn't go short here because everything's still above the trend line. But when we push down, and you don't want to go long right there because that bar is very neutral. But when it breaks higher and turns, I like going short right there for a quick scalp. And then, of course, it bounces. And now you think we're probably going to a new high. And this, even though we make a little higher high here, this is two legs back and a higher low. And that's a really bullish bar. And that kind of sets that trend line right there. So I like going long there. And when it turns back here and fails to go lower and turns back up, this is a really big bar. So your stop would have to go below the signal bar, which is really this one. So on this one, I would use a limit order and try to get back in here. And you could have gotten filled all the way back to here. I still am not sure if that quite. That's 7 ticks. So it would have been 8 right there. So yeah, if you entered right there, you would have made it within our 2-point rule. And I like that one. And I like adding on there. Again, you need to get in a little better than from above the top of that bar. So then again, you get 2 more legs back. And this confirms the trend line. That's a fairly bullish bar. There's actually a support here, a double bottom. There's a little trend line that works down here, and you get a break, and it tries to make a new low, but it can't because the trend line takes over. But that's really still 2 legs back with a 2-legged correction, and that's a fairly bullish bar. You might have let that one break up, and since it didn't close on its high and use a limit order, but I'm okay with just going to stop there because you got a clear trend, and this confirms it. And where does it turn down at the top again, and it pushes one more time higher, and then you're working down. This was your first break, and it tries to go lower, makes a higher low, and gives you this bullish bar. Again, it's a fairly big bar. You can see it's exactly 8 ticks, so you would have to get back in here, and you could have, and you probably wouldn't have got out before we got to the high there, but you could have gotten in when it came back to here. I don't like re-entering here as much because it's not a very good bar, but look how it closes back up here. It makes another high or low, and you can treat that like a failed second entry long. The key here that the reason I don't like going long there, making that one blue, is that it's so close to that high and it's held multiple times across there. You can see it, but this bar is not the most bullish bar either. It closes way up in here, but it's still got a little stem there. So if you enter here, you have to let it back up and get in back here. And you could have gotten in all the way back to here, and then you would have gotten out okay. This is the one that's really tempting for a short because how bearish it is. But notice we don't have a new high yet, and everything's still closing at that EMA. We hadn't really gotten a push through that looks like a reversal yet. So, and you can tell they trapped people here. I didn't like going long there, and it was real tempting here, but the bar's too bearish, and because we keep turning down, I think you're better off just to skip all this. And the only reason I like going short here is because you can see the range working across here. You can see that we're bouncing there every time, and you can see the top part there. So you get this little small bar. It's just 2 ticks. It's very low risk, and so I like entering there, just trying to ride it back to here at least. But if you got in this one, you could have ridden it all the way down. Any runners would have been safe. It turned out to be a really good trade. And we make a higher low here, but look how we're just stacked up sideways there. There's stems on each side. It does push 2 bars up, but we don't have a close outside of this trend line, and the odds are we're probably going here. But notice what happens. It tries to go higher and gives you that big bearish bar. I like going short there, thinking that, hey, we may get a measured move like this one back down. And it ends up bouncing again. So you might have even gotten, and look how it just starts going sideways. If you held on, you would have gotten out of this one. It does go back to the low, but I wouldn't enter anything else after that point because this is getting into the, you don't want to enter anything right through there. Look at that. That's sideways. Look how closes are on both sides. That's what it starts to look like a lot of times going into a big news item because nobody wants to trade. Everybody wants to wait and see what the news is going to do. So from that point on, I would not have traded. The first time I would have considered a trade was right here. And even then I might have waited. But you got 2 legs down. So you got a second entry long here. And then it pushes back down. And this is like a little breakout pullback short. It gets right back inside the range. Pulls back. And look how bearish that bar is. And at that point, you weren't sure really where this low was. It could have been all the way down here. That's probably where I would mark it, but at the time I was kind of using the closes, so you got to consider that. But you figure we're headed down here. I figured it may bounce back some, but probably continue on down, but you would have been out of that pretty quickly. And I do think in the end it was down here. And notice how we bounce back. But you don't have a close outside that trend line until right here, and so we'll probably try to test it again. Even though that confirmed the trend line, that's not a very good signal bar either. So you're better off to wait. And then we're kind of going sideways, but at least everything's closing below that EMA. And notice how when it finally opens right there and closes almost on its low, I like going short then. Figuring that you can ride it down to here. It actually pushes on through like it's going to head to the lower side, but it doesn't make it. But that's because you had all this support here, and there's people probably buying it up right there. Normally I would like this long, but because of this trend line working down through here, and there's been no close outside yet, it's questionable. But it is a failed break. It does fit our rules, and a lot of times you'll catch the low of the day like this. And so you might want to be aggressive there. If you're being aggressive, you probably want to take that one. Then it pulls back, makes a higher low. This is actually where your stop has to go below, but this is the signal bar. So when it broke above that one, I would definitely use a limit order here and try to get a little better entry most likely, because it's a long way from the low here to the high here. And you figure we're going to push on up and make a new high, but it only has to go 1 tick above that. So you got to get a little better entry there. This one, the only reason I didn't like this one, or made this one blue and not green, is because it's such a bullish bar, and it does make a higher low, and you can see the higher support right across there. It's set up. Excuse me. Right across there, and it's bouncing right off of it. So, but I'd use a limit order there. I really would, because your stop really has to go below that bar. And when it gets up here, you really could make a point for a short there, but it's so close to 2, and look how bearish, and it's right back inside. So really, that one should be, I really should mark that one. But it's just so close to the 2 o'clock hour. But you can see the one coming up, the break, move to a new high, and where does it turn down? Right off that higher line where it's turned down many times. And that was a quick, easy move too, even though it did bounce again. So yeah, pretty much trying to sell the resistance and buy the support today. There's not as many buys in here because we just didn't get the setups down here, and most of it was in this kind of in this range when you really couldn't be too confident in this support until this one set up. And then by the time this one bounced, normally that would probably be a chance to go long there. But this is in the news, right, going right into that last hour before the news, and I don't really like the setup. And you don't really get anything else until right at the news. So you might, the only reason that you wouldn't consider that one, otherwise I would have liked that trade right there. It turned down and look how bullish. But it's 10 minutes before the news, and you don't want to risk being in there because it could shoot down and then shoot up. So, but you can see the price action is still valid. The breakouts failed, and then it fails to the downside, and then it gets back in the range, and later in the afternoon it's sold on off. So generally, if you trade up into a range, it's going to succeed breaking out to the upper side. Didn't do that today, though. Really what you got is you got the support down here. We just have a bigger range day. This was just most of it was up here on this high, but in the end we end up closing right down here across these bottoms again. And so it's just, even at the end of the day, it's just a bigger range is all it is. You can see that. That was actually the overnight low right there. We didn't miss getting back down there by a tick or so. But anyway, that's what I saw today. Pretty good trading day. You had to just be a little patient through here. It's really only one trade that I liked. I mean, you could have made an argument to go short here on these, but I think you're just being very risky. Same thing here. You might have made a point to, you might have considered going long, but I didn't mark them. I think they're risky. There's not a lot of room in there, and you got to get a little bitty bar like you did up here. You can see that little bitty. It's only 2 ticks, so that's very low risk right there. So, but I'm going to wrap it up. Nothing else much we can say about today. It's just like I said, about a 5-point range for the most part. So, and on these kind of days, generally you're better off to sell the highs and buy the lows of the range. And really, if you'd have bought any of these lows and sold any of these highs, you'd have made money every time. So I like these days. They're real predictable. I liked this one was a little questionable because of the 2 news items and the fact that we got so tight right across there. But I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week tomorrow. But this is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.